Hello World Part 2, Rolling a Dice. Python can generate random numbers to make digital dice. In Python, you call a function to perform an action. You've already been using it with the print command to output text. That's what you guys have been doing over here when we click play. This is all, inputting stuff, and this is outputting that text. We can define a new function to group code together so we can name it and reuse it. So we are going to be making a function definition, and we are going to be organizing that by putting those definitions under this spot. So if we go look at our program, we want to go find line 7 over here, and we can see that it says put function definitions under here. And on line 8, we are going to define and create our first nickname, our first function that helps us shorten and reuse stuff. So that function is going to be called roll dice. That way we can roll a dice and we can do it as many times as we want. And that's going to be using over here the random int or random integer being a type of number, so random number function, using the random library that we can see that was imported at the top over here. So it says from random, import random int. This is code that someone else wrote that we are going to be using, so we don't actually have to write it, we just have to use it. So how does this work? So on line 7, we're going to put our definition over here, and we're going to define the function called roll dice. So we're going to call that roll underscore dice, open parentheses, close parentheses, and then we have over here that colon. So I'm going to say define roll underscore dice, open parentheses, close parentheses, colon, and when I hit enter over here, you're going to notice it adds this tiny little space over here. That space is required in order for our definition to work. Python works organizationally with those spacing to say what is a subgroup of the original idea. So this, we're going to, with that spacing, which if we look carefully over here, you would just have to hit the tab key on the keyboard to re-enter it. We are going to then go ahead and define what rolling the dice is. So we're going to print Python, comma, can make a dice over here. And instead of going side by side, or back and forth, I'm going to split my screen so I have this on both sides. So I'm going to drag this over to that side, and now I have my, I dragged the wrong thing out. Now I have my instructions, and I have my, okay, there we go, projects. So down below, I'm going to write roll dice. I have that space. We're going to type print, parentheses, and you have Python, and that is just going to be used as a variable. So when I print Python over here, I'm just going to show you how this works now. If I run this, nothing different is going to happen because I'm defining what rolling a dice is. I have to now write down below roll dice. Notice I don't need the colon at the end over there. Rolling a dice, all it's going to do is it's going to print what I wrote here. So basically this command is being nicknamed to do anything that I say to do inside of that. So I'm going to continue adding over here, can make a dice. So Python over here, comma, apostrophe, can make end apostrophe. So this is a string. This is going to input just text. So I'm going to have Python and then that text. So if I, add more to that, I'm going to add a comma over here. And then I'm going to write dice. And dice over here is a variable. If I go to my emoji tab, I can see that dice is one of those things. So when I type dice, what's going to end up appearing is that dice over there. So if I run that, now it can make and that dice appears that I'm calling from this emoji library. So print can make a dice. When I write roll dice, this is currently what's appearing. But I want more than that. I actually want a dice to be rolled. So I'm going to then print over here, u rolls a, and then I'm going to have my comma, rand int, so random number, parentheses 1, 6. So like a random number between 1 and 6. So if I run this now, it says Python can make a dice, and it's going to, every time I run, it'll pick a random number between 1 and 6. And you can see it rolling in real time. So we've used the library of random, which has a function called random integer, which we are now using over here to generate a random number. And then I have, it defined on line 8 through 10 over here. And then down below, I'm writing roll dice so that these two lines of code actually run. Now notice if I did not have that indent over here, I'm going to get an error because nothing is in my definition. So I need to go to the beginning and I need to indent those two things. So it says over here, the lines under roll dice are indented. That's what I was talking about. It's this space right here. With Python, in using those indents, is being told that those indented lines are part of the function. The underscore in roll dice is used between words and variable function names in Python to make them easier to read. You can't use a space, so we always use that underscore when we're naming it. Then, if we run our code, it won't roll the dice, because without this command, we can see it currently works. But if I get rid of this command and I have it just defined over here, then it doesn't actually work, because it knows how to do it, but until I end up writing roll dice, that function is not being called and it doesn't actually work. So now that I rewrite it, it ends up working. It's calling that dice roll to work. So one thing that someone might have is you might have a missing comma, or you might have something that's slightly off. So make sure that your indent, your spacing is there. So run your program, make sure you can debug it. If you are good, we're going to keep moving on. Uses of random numbers include cryptography, data science, and adding variety into games and computer art. Computers generate random numbers using an algorithm. For numbers to be really random, you need an unpredictable input from the real world. So these are not truly random. They are just generated using a computer that says, like, weight the numbers evenly and then generate. So it's computer-based, not like pure random, which is a little confusing, but it's okay. So over here, next what we're going to do is we're going to use our variable to include emojis into this dice roll. So the fire variable stores a fire emoji. We can see that under our emoji tab over here. Fire, when we type fire, has that fire emoji. So if I wanted to write print over here, fire, a little fire emoji would appear down below. But we want the same number of emojis of fire to appear as the dice roll. So that's what we're going to be working on over here. So what would happen if you use over here print, instead of just fire, print fire times random integer 1, 6. So we'll notice over here that we rolled a 3, and then I had a random number between 1 and 6 being generated. So if I keep running it, you'll notice that fire is not related to the roll over here. This random integer is being generated here, and when I write roll dice, a random number is being generated here. So there's two different separate randomly generated numbers. So we don't want this number and this number to be different. We want them to be the same number that is generated. So how can we generate that with the same number? We're going to change our code to save this value. So whatever that makes, we want to save that number. So if it rolls a 3, we want to save that 3 and then have that 3 be applied to that fire. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify our definition of rolling the dice. So we're going to go back to our definition. The first line, print Python can make a dice. That's all good. And then on line number 10, we are going to be modifying this one. So we're going to create a variable called roll. So this line of code we're going to be modifying, but in the meantime, I am going to comment it out with a little hashtag, and I'm going to be working on line 10. So I'm going to set roll equal to random integer, comma 1 to 6. So pick a random number equal to 1 to 6 over there. So whenever I use roll, it is going to generate that random number, and it's going to be stored in that value of roll over here. And then I'm going to give this line, I'm going to bring it back, and when I run it, it's still not going to quite work right. So I'm going to say you rolled a random integer between 1 and 6. Roll over here is storing a number, but it's not actually being used. So I want to change that random integer on line 11 to instead be the command, or use the variable roll. So I am currently using roll to generate it, and then I'm calling it over here, and then what you should notice is that it's printing out the same number of fire emojis as the roll that it's happening over here. So we're going to modify that again. So roll dice, what we're going to do, I'm going to get rid of that line down below. So my command roll dice up at the top over here, roll is equal to a random integer between 1 and 6. Then you rolled a comma roll, and then I'm going to print. Now, if I run this again, those fire emojis aren't going to be printed, so I'm going to make that in my definition. So I'm going to say print fire multiplied by roll. So I want the same number of fire emojis as the number that I roll. So if I print fire times roll, now you'll notice over here, whatever I roll, it's going to print that out, and it's going to work. Now, it doesn't have to be fire. I could use something else, like star. I could use a different emoji, and it will print those out. Let's say I wanted it to be rainbow. I could pick anything in my library, and I can make that print out, which is pretty cool. So you can play around with that over there. The symbol star means multiply, so fire times roll multiplies the text in the fire variable by the number contained in the roll variable. Test your project every time to make sure you understand how the code works. Variables are useful when you need to use the same value multiple times in your code. Giving a variable sensible name makes your code easier to understand. I can also now say over here, print over here. If I said print roll, what's going to end up happening? Name roll is not defined on line number 22. Why is that the case? Well, doesn't matter. Let's focus on upgrading the dice. We can tackle that later. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. So at this step over here, we want to upgrade the dice so that the user can choose the maximum number. It's not just a random number between 1 and 6. Now, technically, yes, I could change that to 1 and 10, and it will change the number, but I want to be able to allow you, or whatever person using my program, is able to select how big that is. So I'm going to, again, continue to modify my definition of roll dice. So print Python can make a dice. This line is going to stay the same. Then over here, instead of having my command being roll is equal to random integer, what I'm going to say is I'm going to make a new variable called max. Max is equal to input, like the user wants to input something, parentheses, and then quotation marks, how many sides, question mark, colon, and then I have that apostrophe, and then it's going to wait for user input. So print max equals input, and then I'm going to, on the second line, right over here, print, parentheses, and then I have the colon, that, and this is a forward slash, which is right below the backspace. So forward slash right below the backspace key over here. So that forward slash over here, apostrophe S, a D, so it's going to ask you like how big of a dice, and then comma, it will tell you how many sides it is, max. So the variable max over here is when I click run, it's going to ask me how many sides. So if I type in 10, max is going to store the number I give. So if I write 10, it's storing 10 as max, and then we're printing max back out on the next line. So it's taking what I write and then spewing it back out. So how many sides? 10. Then it said that's a D10. So it's taking my input that I typed. Now if I run it again, it'll say how many sides? 1111. That's a D1111. It's taking the number and it's spewing it back out. But it's not putting out the right number of emojis. It should print out whatever my roll would have got me. So what I need to now add to this step over here is I still have on line 13, roll equals random integer between 1 and 6 over here. We're going to be modifying that in a second. Also, before I mentioned that that's a forward slash. The forward slash over here tells Python that an apostrophe is part of a word. It's not part of the string. That way, the whole word that's, that will appear. Without that forward slash over here, what's going to happen is we're going to get that error, and that S is outside of it. So we want that forward slash S, and the whole word that's is going to then appear. So in order to upgrade this so that when I type in, 100, I actually get the right number of emojis, what I need to do is I need to modify my roll variable on line number 13, or now on 12. So roll is no longer going to be its own random integer between 1 and 10. I'm going to say roll is equal to random integer, and then 1, comma, integer parentheses max. Max being the variable we just said, which is whatever we type in, that's what that number is going to be. So now we're rolling a random number between 1 and whatever we type in, integer max over here. So if we run this over here and we say 100, that's a D100, and what did I do? I have rad int, not rand int. So let me run that again. How many sides? I have 100. That's a D100, and that's the number I rolled. If I run it again, I'm going to move myself over here. 1,000, we can see a lot of emojis appearing, whatever the number that I rolled. So now the emoji over here is including whatever the max number is, and it's going to print out whatever it is based off of that roll over here. Run your project. When the program reaches the input line, it will wait for you to enter a response before continuing. Then try it again with a different input. So if every time you do it, you can play with it, you can test it, how many sides, and it'll be different every time over here. So now we're gonna save our project, and we're gonna move on to the final stage of this project, which is sentence starter. If you have any questions, pause the video and then let me know. I'll see you guys in the next video for the last part of the project. Peace.